Joining me now is the Daily Telegraph's Tim Blair. Tim, thank you for joining me. I want to start with your column today talking about those awful murders of two Israeli embassy staffers in Washington, D.C. You wrote in your column, you said left-wing activists were once so sensitive and delicate they wanted trigger warnings attached to everything and everyone, but now those same snowflakes have become pro-Hamas cheerleaders who revel in the butchery of their leaders and foot soldiers. And look, you know, you're spot on. There were several Australian pro-Palestine activists who had absolutely no sympathy for the brutal murders of those embassy staffers. What does it say more broadly about the left?
It says that they're liars, that they'll adopt any sort of posture that is to their advantage, but with no moral or factual or ethical underpinning. So, you know, as you mentioned, we had this whole snowflake era that lasted right up until October 7th. Right up until October 7, 2023, when we had people who needed safe rooms, for example, at universities. They needed trigger warnings in case there was something in a university text that was going to scare them. They needed protection from controversial speakers. You know, if someone like Jordan Peterson was going to talk at a university, they'd all cry and scream about it. They were in a perpetual state of terror. And then butchers invaded Israel and slaughtered and raped and kidnapped people, and they were fine with it. Turns out, no, that's all cool. It was all the other things, you know, the wrong pronouns frightened them, but butchers aimed with knives and rifles didn't scare them at all because they were killing, in the eyes of these activists, they were killing the right people.
Yeah, look, you're not wrong. It's I just think it's absolutely appalling. And we can't forget as well, there are still hostages being held, and yet the topic always just veers off in another direction. Let's change pace a little bit here. More than 100 new renewable energy projects across Queensland could be axed. It comes just after the state government axed the $1 billion 88-turbine Moonlight Range wind farm. Tim, this is fascinating to me because new laws introduced last month can be applied retrospectively, meaning more and more projects are in the firing line. The government says, well, if they don't meet community expectations, they're going to be scrapped. And I say, hallelujah, good on David Crisafulli for taking a stand on this.
Yes. Well, you know, it's kind of cute, isn't it, that renewable energy isn't renewable. It can't just renew itself, can it? And plus, I guess, the fact that renewable energy doesn't exist unless old-fashioned energy builds it. You know, you can't knock together a wind turbine such as we're seeing now using wind turbine energy, for example. You can't fuse the metal and do all the, you know, high-level foundry work required to build such things with the relatively measly stuff you get from there. I guess just to your point, Danica, the real issue is, why did we go so deep on this stuff in the first place if at such an early stage, relatively early stage, we're having to bail? What was the whole point in over-investing there in so many areas, especially when Australia had so many decades left of centuries left of traditional energy? We've made terrible mistakes, and I'm with you. You know, hallelujah, we're waking up to ourselves, but my God, the amount of money we've blown in the meantime, it boggles the mind.
And we're still going to blow money on it. I mean, it's going to rack up hundreds of billions of dollars to push for this renewables fantasy over years and years and years. And we're not getting bang for our buck. We know that. We're not getting a good return on investment already. And we're just plunging ourselves more into darkness as we go along under Labor. Now, look, this is hilarious. The Australian Electoral Commission will carry out a partial recount in the Melbourne seat of Goldstein after a request from independent Zoe Daniel. I mean, look, to me, she just sounds like a sore loser, especially given her premature celebrations after the election. Have a look. Oh, it's an absolute shocker, Tim. It's an absolute shocker. Every time I watch it, I cringe. But look, how embarrassing for her now. She wants a recount. The Electoral Commission said, all right, we'll give you a partial recount. I just think bow out gracefully.
Well, as a few people have pointed out online, Zoe was very much against Donald Trump, you know, trying to claim victory in 2020 when the vote didn't go his way. Like, you know, I think one of her lines was along the lines of, you know, take your loss, take it on the chin, move on. Don't be throwing the electoral process into disruption. And yet now we have exactly the same thing. But that, yeah, man, I think it all comes down to the dancing, Danica. And I'm not one to profess any great expertise in that area, but I think even I wouldn't try some steps, which I think she was risking whiplash at some point. Those neck movements were. I don't think they were a healthy way to go on the dance floor.
No, I mean, we don't want to, don't want to get her neck put out of a joint. She's already got a nose out of joint over the count. Can't have anything else out of joint, Tim. Now, look, I want to return to, I spoke about this earlier, this awful, awful incident over in Liverpool in the UK where 50 people have been injured, including children, after a car rammed into crowds. Look, Tim, it's not being treated as terrorism, but police believe it was deliberate. I can't even count how many times this sort of attack has happened in recent years. The thing is, we put up bollards here, there and everywhere, but surely it shouldn't have to come to that.
It certainly shouldn't. And Liverpool is, like most larger European, especially British cities, Liverpool's fairly secure. I mean, I've wandered around there, and it's kind of apparent that the place is not open generally to attack. There's a relatively large police presence. The buildings are secured. Again, just to say that in most larger European and British cities, it is just like that. So whatever lapse has occurred here to allow a van that sort of access, and we've all seen horribly, through our disbelieving eyes, we've all seen the footage. And just the fact that it got so close, even without any kind of a horrific conclusion, just that it got close enough is damning in some regard. But how to fix it? Did you lock down entire cities? Do you deny all freedoms? We don't know.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, and if it's not terrorism, we can't just say, it was mental health. I mean, that's not an excuse. And you can't lock down entire cities. You can't border us up with bollards here, there and everywhere. I mean, look, I don't know what the answer is, but certainly there's been a number of attacks like this in recent years, that's for sure. Tim Blair, good to speak with you. Thank you so much for joining me on the show this evening. Really appreciate it.